On today's show, the NBA draft is less than 48 hours away. Onsi Saleh, the new GM of the Hawks, talked for the first time on Monday, plus your mailbag questions and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2005 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you deeper in the night here on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, you get $150 in terms of dollars in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. It's been very busy. The draft is almost here. This is probably going to be our second to last episode before the draft itself arrives on Wednesday. I'll be doing a show Tuesday evening, no matter what happens between now and then. But in the meantime, I do want to shout out to people that have been joining me throughout this process. Maybe I'll do this tomorrow as well. But in the meantime, I have been joined by a lot of guests over the last 2 months or so leading up to the big day on Wednesday. That includes Jonathan Wasserman, Ben Pfeiffer, Brian Schroeder, Rafael Barlow, Bryce Hendricks, Will Rucker, Leif Tulane, Richard Stamen, plus visits that I have, people that I have on the show regularly who cover the Hawks, but also keen eyes on the draft from Kevin Chouinard, Glenn Willis, Tyler Jones, and Andrew Kelly as well. Lots of guests, lots of listeners, so I appreciate you checking out the podcast over the last 2 months. And again, it's going to happen again tomorrow, but in the meantime, it's kind of an interesting in-between show. So if you missed it, I had a 2-part episode on Friday night with Ben Pfeiffer. I had a 2-part episode as well on Sunday that I dropped with my friend Tyler Jones. All of that was NBA draft heavy, and that's, of course, leading the conversation for everyone outside of Oklahoma City right now, maybe Indiana, is the draft. And that's going to be happening again. Wednesday evening is the big day. The Hawks have 2 picks in the first 22 on Wednesday. But today's kind of the in-between show in that we're not all the way to the draft yet, but we also have some mailbag questions. It's also kind of an odd thing. It's hard to plan. There might be some news, but there hasn't been a ton of news so far. But what we do have on today's podcast is the first ever press conference / media availability from new Hawks general manager Onsi Saleh. We talked for about 20 minutes or so on Monday afternoon. I posted that full audio, by the way, to the audio feeds of Locked On Hawks. I only had the audio, so it's not on YouTube because there was literally no video that I had captured. But I would encourage the YouTube audience to subscribe and check out the audio podcast of this feed, Apple, Spotify, Overcast, etc. There. Check us out there, subscribe, listen to that podcast to get the full context on Onsi's comments. But I want to play some clips for you in this little conversation to kind of tee up what was said, what I made of it all. And that was definitely the lead story in Hawks land on Monday was Onsi speaking about a lot of different things. So first and foremost, I want to play his opening statement, literally his first public on-record comments from Onsi since he joined the front office a year plus ago. And the first, by the way, by anyone in the organization in basketball operations. I know Steve Koonen's talked a little bit on the radio, but he's kind of the CEO on the business side. This is the first basketball-related comments by anyone with the Hawks on the record since Landry Fields was fired about 2 months ago. So here's the open statement from Onsi.
First and foremost, just wanted to thank the Wrestler family, Tony, just empowering me to build out our front office. I thought we had 2 tremendous additions in Bryson Graham and Peter Dinwiddie. It's 30-plus years experience for us. Amazing human beings, culture adds. So just thanking Tony for letting me build out this front office and empowering me to do that. Just feel like we're in a really good place organizationally. Feel like we're in a great place with our front office moving forward. Just really excited to build with the Hawks now. Absolutely. And it's draft season now too. So a lot been going on. We've had 80-plus players come through our program here, and probably spoken or connected with at least 100 when you take into Chicago and the Combine. So we have some flexibility and some optionality, but I really like our 2 picks at 13 and 22. I think we're going to be able to add 2 quality players to that mix. So really excited about the draft, feel really prepared about it. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
As you hear there, he obviously talked about being empowered quite a bit by Tony Wrestler to build out the front office. It was clear to me as a takeaway from today that Onsi is speaking very authoritatively when it comes to he is the kind of the buck stops here. He's making the decisions. He's the number one guy on the flow chart right now in the organization. He made that very clear that he also made the hires of the new guys that came in, all that stuff. Also, he was positive, generally speaking, about the team, where they are right now, which you expect, of course. He said they brought in 80-plus guys to work out in Atlanta. That is not a surprise. I've been saying the entire time, I haven't been chronicling like each and every workout. I haven't been reporting those. But my stance has basically been they're going to work out everybody below a certain level. Because unless you're a guaranteed top 6 pick, everyone should be interested in Atlanta, even guys deeper down. Without a second-round pick, I get it. But you have to fill out summer league rosters and two-way slots. And basically the range was very wide. And Onsi kind of confirmed that on this front. So that's one thing. That was his first statements. We'll dig in a little bit more now to his other comments. Again, I'm not going to play the entire thing for you. That is available in full on the audio feeds of Locked On Hawks. But Onsi was asked about his philosophy as he kind of takes over the GM job. Here's what he had to say about his philosophy overall.
Just stepping into this role, it's comfortable in the sense that I was very fortunate to be in 2 organizations like the Spurs and Warriors. I hit the lottery when it came to learning from under R.C. Buford and Bob Myers and Pop and Steve Kerr. So I got really lucky there, but they really helped me along and be prepared for this role. And honestly, just ready to roll with it. And when it comes to the draft, I always pick the best player available. Like, that's my philosophy. I don't believe in picking for a position. If there's a guy that makes sense for us, we're going to take him. And always the best player. That's the philosophy there.
So within that, you can hear one interesting part about the draft. And he, I would say repeatedly today, emphasized his belief that taking the best player available in the draft is the way to go. Now, that happened throughout. It was not just to say it. This is probably the most clear one. If you listen to the show before or regularly, you will know that I agree with this stance in the draft. I know there's a lot of back and forth right now, and this is to be expected. There's always philosophical debates about the draft. This is not anything new. Not everyone agrees with me on this one. I get it. Onsi seems to be in line with what I think as well about like being best player available, especially in the draft, not drafting for need, drafting for the best talent. Teach their own. I think personally, you get in trouble more drafting for position and for archetype than you do just finding the best talent overall. So I like that answer. Not everybody did. I saw some negativity on social media. I get it. If you like that, you'll like it. If you don't, you don't. But I personally believe that drafting best player available is the right way to go. So he is on that. Later on, I actually asked Onsi a follow-up about whether there were any traits that he wants to value in the draft, and it was a short answer, but I asked about the BPA comments. Basically, he mentioned having multiple ways to impact winning as an emphasis for them. So obviously, one of the big themes was that Onsi's not going to be giving a lot of specifics, and one thing I will say is that that's very normal. People that listen to it were like, well, he didn't really say anything. Yeah, that's kind of the nature of the beast with a front office person talking 40 days before the draft. Like, it's going to kind of be cloak and dagger to some degree, but that was notable to me. In fact, he basically no commented on a question that he got about the Hawks and whether they might plan to still hire someone above him, basically, as a president of basketball operations. Basically, he can't answer that question. Like, it's not his decision. He currently is number one on the org chart. I've said now for a long time that I believe he's going to be the number one guy. At this point, it would be very, very strange to me and everyone that I've talked to if the Hawks now hired a president at some point in the next little while, because all of the prep has been done for the offseason. You are rolling with this group. Onsi, his 2 new lieutenants, Kyle Korver, etc. Like, it'd be strange, but obviously he can't come out and say no unless Tony Ressler comes out and says no, as far as whether to hire somebody else. Keep that in mind. Later on, Reggie Chapman, good friend of the podcast from 11 Alive and Tegna, who also is a part of this podcast network. He asked about the vision that Onsi might have on players they want to bring into the organization. Here's what he had to say about that.
Landry would also always talk about the ethos of the players that you bring in. I think for you, what is your vision of the type of players that you guys want part of your franchise, and I guess it's, of course, building forward as well?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like, just appreciating Landry's a friend of mine, and I wouldn't be here without him. So just appreciating his vision and what he brought to the table when it came to talking about Hawks DNA and things like that. I don't really use terms like that. It's more of the things that I look for. Like in San Antonio, we always had the 3 things we cared about most were character, selfless, pound the rock. Here, it's competitiveness, toughness, resilience, and adaptability. Those are the things I look for with players.
All right, yeah, I kind of thought it was funny that he doesn't really use the term Hawks DNA and kind of said that way that he did. I kind of laughed when that was happening. No shots at Landry, who Onsi, I think, repeatedly said nice things about. They are friends. They work together, of course. But I think it's pretty clear that Onsi's not going to be talking in the same kind of fashion. I think Landry's a little bit more corporate speaky, whereas us a little bit more plain. Also, like his general volume level was very low, as you maybe can hear from here, but especially if you saw some of the videos making the rounds today. Honestly, he's not a high talker. He's not like an excitable talker. He's very matter of fact and kind of, button up in that way. But that's kind of a good indication of what he just said there, as you heard, about the vision that they want to kind of, check the boxes of, and the traits and all that fun stuff at this point in time. All right, there is more to come when it comes to sound from Onsi and what he had to say on Monday. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. We've all done this in the past, I'm sure, but at times I look at my bank account, wonder where actually all my money happens to go between dining out and online shopping and entertainment. It's easy to lose track sometimes. That's where Monarch Money comes in for you. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. And at Monarch Money, they're not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can actually track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. You can stop just managing your money and start building wealth instead. When I started using Monarch, I was actually spending a ton of money on little things like food or whatever else in my life. Just one example, but now I budget smarter and I save more all the time with Monarch Money. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can actually use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan your long-term goals all in one place. And if you want to manage your money in conjunction with your partner, that can be smoother than ever as well. You can track shared accounts and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without any of the stress. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. The code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Today's show is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table potentially. Think about the last time you actually had an urgent need in your own life, perhaps for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person you called didn't answer, did you wait? You probably didn't. You probably moved on, and that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system, and it's built to streamline customer communications all from one app on your phone or your computer. OpenPhone also lets you manage your business calls and texts from a single app. And they have the shared inbox feature that's awesome. It's a game changer for you and your whole team. Jump into one conversation instantly without missing a beat. OpenPhone's AI agent also can handle your calls after hours, answer common questions, and capture any leads so that you never miss a customer. At OpenPhone, they're also offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That is OPENPHONE, openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will also port them over for you at no extra charge. One more time, it's openphone.com/lockedonnba. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, and I also got some questions about Trey Young, as you might expect. And the most comprehensive answer to what he had to say about Trey was a question from Zach Klein of WSB TV. I also included the follow-up question, as you'll hear in a second, that was about Quinn Snyder. So it's actually 2 questions and 2 answers. And here is us talking about Trey and then Quinn.
Between now or when you officially became the general manager to whether Trey gets traded, re-signed, re-upped, or just stays with his team, there will always be a topic of conversation until something definitive happens. So as it stands right now, Onsi, how do you feel about him and the future of this franchise with Trey Young?
Yeah, we're locked in with Trey. We talked last year, next season, we're just locked into next season, ready to move forward and be the best team that we could possibly be moving forward. And I think a lot of his leadership from last season went probably unnoticed to the common eye. Like, the way that he helped develop our young guys and make them better was significant. So, I mean, just continuing on with that and hopefully just making our team better.
What's your relationship with Q? The collaboration, the discussion, how do you guys form that partnership?
Oh, Q and I have a great partnership. It's he is, whenever I talk about roster stuff, draft, looking into what's next for the roster and the team, I always take his input without question. At the end of the day, though, it's always going to be my decision on whatever we do with our roster.
So you get the idea there. Not a ton of specifics about much of anything. That's a theme, again, of this entire conversation. But he did say that they are, quote, locked in with Trey. Didn't shy away from that. Obviously, he was not, giving the glowing, we're going to extend Trey for sure. People are asking me follow-ups about that. What do you mean by this? Obviously, there's a negotiation that's about to happen or actually can happen now with Trey and the Hawks. There's always a little bit of interesting stuff there, messaging. No one wants to give up their leverage, but it seems like Onsi was pretty upbeat about Trey throughout, which I thought was kind of my takeaway, and then predictably positive about Quinn, while also stating again in that answer that the final decisions are Onsi. He did not shy away from that. With Landry, everything was a collaborative process. And look, Onsi would tell you and did say today, you still want a collaborative process, but he did not make any ifs, ands, or buts. Like, he's the final decision. Now, obviously, when you have an owner, the owner can be the final decision. He can overrule at any point. But honestly, it was very clear, like, he's the number one guy, his decisions, his building, and that'll be interesting to kind of monitor in the coming days. And the last bit of audio here, not a ton of like player-specific conversations from Onsi, probably on purpose if I had to guess, with the current roster. But I got a question about size that I wanted to pass along to you and the answer to that.
I'm curious, when you have a big who is kind of looked at as undersized and you have a point guard who is looked at as undersized, how important is it to bring in size to your team with the draft picks and with free agency?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, like, I think there are ways that you could build a team that you don't need traditional types of things. In the sense of, like, we do have some long athletic guys out there, which is really interesting for our defense and our play style moving forward. Yeah, when we get to that point in our season, and we'll address some things there, but I feel really good about a lot of our group moving forward. We are a very young group that is still developing, and I think that's important to realize here. But really excited for Onyeka. Really excited for Onyeka.
So this is one where I think you kind of hear what you want to hear. I thought it was a good question from Caleb Johnson of 92.9, the game there. He did say that they're excited about Okongwu, which you, of course, hear there. It gave an answer that I think appreciated. Like, it kind of downplays the narrative that you have to have a certain thing at size and whatever. I think that you want to have positional size. He did say in that answer, like, having big athletic forwards makes it easier. And that is true. One reason I have been probably a little bit higher on Okongwu as the center is that I think he's good. But also another one is that the Hawks have the ability to build out around him with someone like Jalen, someone like Zach, who's legitimately 6'10", playing the three, even Dyson as a big physical player. Add more of those guys, it kind of gets more into that. And then obviously was quite positive about Trey and all of his answers today, as I already mentioned. So other than that, there was a Summer League question that he kind of declined to name players. I know people wanted to hear about Summer League and players. I love that too. It's been cloak and dagger, obviously, with everything. He's going to wait until their final determinations about after the draft. So people keep asking me. I don't have definitive answers for you. What I will say is that anyone they draft, barring injury, you expect to be there playing in Summer League. And then there's a bunch of maybes. I would say Ricochet is a possibility. Probably not for the whole week, but maybe for a game or two. Kobe Buffkin is a maybe. Dom Barlow is a maybe. Daquan Plowden, I would say, is a maybe. Even Nikola Jurisic, who's not under contract right now, but was the draft pick last year in the second round, is a maybe. So they could have 5, 6, 7, 8 roster guys. They can have 2 roster guys. We just don't know what the philosophy is going to be. And Onsi declined to kind of give anything else on that. So overall, I would say there was a lot of emphasis on flexibility and optionality. I kind of made fun of, like, if you're doing like the bingo card or today, like the drinking game, Onsi likes to receive questions by saying good question, kind of a reset things. He used optionality a lot. It was a very cordial, upbeat conversation for sure. For example, Lauren Williams of the AJC, in front of the podcast, asked about whether the focus was staying put at 13 and 22 in the draft. And Onsi said in the answer that the key is optionality. So, like, he's not going to commit to anything. And I'll say this now, like, everyone who was responding with the fact that this, like, kind of a blah press conference with not a ton of information, yes. But I would also say I've attended a lot of these pre-draft conversations. And by that, I mean, like, the week of the draft with Travis Schlenk, with Mike Budenholzer back in the day, Danny Ferry back in the day, and then Landry Fields. This is probably the situation in which you would expect him to say the least. A pre-draft availability is not a time to get a bunch of, like, actionable intel on player stuff, because you haven't begun the offseason yet. And even if you were, you don't want to tip your hand. And on the draft, I mean, I joked about it today, but he's not going to come out and say, we like this prospect, this prospect. He's not going to talk about prospects. Like, he's not going to happen. So you're always going to get a little bit of this uncertainty in the discussions today. And part of that, again, is that what I would say is it would be different if this was not his first time talking to the media. That's why it was covered the way that it was. But, like, no GM is going to talk about prospects a ton right before the draft. And this is in the weeds, but the Braves were on the road today. And why I say that is you get all the local TV people who are much more like general interest than they are about, like, diehard Hawks coverage. And that's not a negative comment, but, like, honestly, was asked a lot about, like, spending time in Atlanta and his backstory. And that's interesting stuff to learn about Onsi, for sure. but like it might have been kind of different if it was like the usual Hawks media crew that like just cover the team, like me and Kevin and Lauren and Jamila, etc. So it's just a different tone when it's it becomes an intro press conference versus like an actual basketball conversation. So it's just different. Again, listen to the entire thing on the audio feeds of this podcast. But overall, I thought Onsi handled it well. There's a lot more to talk about once you can start actually seeing moves and decisions, etc. But in the meantime, we're kind of just checking the box. He's now spoken. And then, by the way, he'll be speaking again Wednesday after the first round, and we'll see what the Hawks do between now and then. All right, more to come on the podcast, including some mailbag questions from you, the listener, after a word from our partners. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are now in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball, under the lights, golf on the greens, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. If you're already following the action, why not make it a little bit more thrilling? You can actually use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. They have all the offerings across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, game props, future bets, live betting, and same-game parlays, among other things. And they also have every sport and every league you can think of as well. That includes the NBA, of course, plus they have the NFL, MLB, college sports, NHL, UFC, golf, tennis, soccer, boxing, and everything in between. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and they actually make the regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right in the ninth inning, they make it like you feel like a part of the action with FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you're new to FanDuel, you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $150 in terms of bonus bets if your first bet wins at FanDuel. Open the FanDuel app right now today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, and to pivot away from Onsi a little bit here, a reminder more than anything else, but a kind of a key date. It was today, actually, Monday, June 23rd. Teams are now allowed to negotiate with their own free agents and their own players who are extension eligible, whether it be rookie extensions or veteran extensions, and guys who are eligible as of July 6th. So that means basically the day after the finals. The finals ended yesterday. Now they're eligible. And for the Hawks, that means the Hawks can now legally talk to and negotiate with a lot of players with different kinds of situations. So their own free agents, that includes Karis LeVert, Larry Nance Jr., Clint Capella, Garrison Matthews. That doesn't mean they're going to talk to all those guys, but they now can, and especially with Karis, that's a big one for the Hawks. Also, the extension eligible players. That's, of course, headlined by Trey. That's the big one by a lot. But also, they're allowed to talk extension if they want to with Mo Gay is extension eligible, and so is George Niang. Again, not expecting that necessarily, but it's a possibility. And then the other one that's kind of a wrinkle is Dyson Daniels on his rookie scale extension. Now, you can't sign anything with anyone until the moratorium ends in July. The exception to that would be if they were to come to a contract extension with Capella or Matthews. They're actually allowed to do that right now for the next 6 days. Not expecting that to happen. So just putting it on a radar because it's a lot of business the Hawks have to do. I know that the draft is the biggest thing right now, but they have a lot of business to handle between now and the start of the season. Draft picks, free agents, team building, mid-level exceptions, extensions, all that stuff. The biggest ones probably urgency-wise are Trey and then Karis LeVert, because Karis will be hitting the market in a week, and we'll see how that all goes. Obviously, Dyson's extension is a big deal as well, but the majority of rookie extension guys don't actually happen until October. Some do, but most of the time, they wait till the end. Jalen was a late one. Onyeka was a late one. Hunter back in the day was a late one. Like, they tend to wait, other than the no-brainer. Like, Trey signed his in July, but everybody else, it seems like, waited a while. So anyway, that's the lay of the land on that. Question from Owl on Twitter, who says, it's nerdy, but do you foresee the Hawks using the TPE and potentially the MLE to add to the roster? How would using these resources affect bringing back LeVert? So earlier this summer, I did a whole segment about the cap and the tax. So I looked at that whole thing now, but it is certainly at least possible the Hawks could add a player with the trade exception, which is the TPE referenced by Owl there, and then also sign someone to the mid-level. The trade exception came back up this week in a way that I wasn't going to react to a ton because I've covered it a lot already this summer. Nothing's new on that front, but Mark Stein and Jake Fisher reported that the Hawks are actively exploring ways to use that. I would echo that. I said it before on the show as well. But basically, for anybody that's missed this so far, Atlanta can, they don't have to, they can add a player in a trade that makes up to $25.2 million without actually having to match salary in that deal. That is a potential weapon. They can add a $20 million player for the cost of nothing as far as matching salary, obviously. You can also take a bad contract on or whatever like that. There's ways to use that that's useful And I would say they don't often get used, but they certainly can get used. If the Hawks keep everyone they currently have under contract and also make 2 draft picks, they'll have like $155 million on the books. That's like 33-ish million below the tax line. Onsi made a comment today about having license to pay the tax, and I was asked about this. My response right now is that yes, he's going to say that. Basically, any GM, you're not going to get into a microphone and immediately say, my owner won't let me pay the tax. Like, that's not going to happen. If you don't remember this, Landry said the same thing multiple times, and they didn't pay the tax. So saying that you have the license to go over the tax line does not mean you actually do have that license, and B, does not mean you're actually going to do it. So that's an ownership decision when it comes to tax. Keep that in mind. That is an ownership level decision. But just to answer that question quickly. So I'm still operating like staying under the tax is likely, not definite, but likely. And that means the Hawks have some restraints. They do have optionality, to use Onsi's term, and they can, if they wanted to, navigate it, use the trade exception, and also use the MLE. LeVert's a wrinkle here. They don't have to use the exception for him. They have his bird right. They can just sign him to wherever they want to. But there are some give and takes. Like you got Terrence Mann's money out there. There's back and forth. I will say I believe still that it is relatively likely that LeVert stays. Not definite, but I think that's likely to happen if I had to guess right now. So if that happens, they got to get creative. But the answer is yes. You can use all these tools together. I'm not sure if they will, but it's a reminder that while it was kind of funny to hear the word optionality so much, they actually do have optionality. They have a lot of very manageable contracts. They have a young roster that's pretty cheap right now. They have exactly one contract on the entire books that I think is like a shaky deal, and it's Terrence Mann. That could change if they give Trey a max. Like that could become a shaky contract. Same with Dyson. Like if you overpay Dyson, that's possible. But for now, they have one commitment. It's like kind of unwieldy, and Terrence Mann. Everybody else is on a good deal. So that gives you a lot of functionality. Plus you have 2 picks and trades, et cetera, et cetera. All right, question from Evan, who says, what is more likely, drafting a successful backup point guard to rival Kobe Buffkin and signing a good backup veteran center, or drafting a successful backup center and then signing a good backup veteran point guard? So one thing I'll say is that it does not have to be either way, nor did he say this, but like he just asked the question, which one's more likely? So I'll answer that question, but it doesn't have to be exactly this way either way. I would also say, not to relitigate what I said earlier about Onsi's draft philosophy, but I would not be going in to the draft trying to plug a hole specifically unless I like the prospects there. And also, I'll say this a lot, probably tomorrow or the next day, rookies are not very good. So you don't want to bank always on a rookie filling a specific role as a rookie. That matters to me if you're trying to win games. But as far as the more big picture answer to the question, I think for me, the more likely and for me, the more practical route are actually the same here looking at the board. I think the more likely route is to draft the backup center who becomes successful in that role and then go the more veteran route at the point guard spot. Now, you can do the other way. I'm not saying you can't, but part of that's the way this draft breaks down. I think the Hawks have a very realistic path to a center at 13 or 22. At 13, you're looking at probably, maybe if Queen fell or Malawak fell, but even more practically, someone like Berenger or Sorber. Or even at 22, I think it's possible that Berenger or Sorber falls there. Plus, then you throw in the mix guys like Ryan Kalkbrenner, Maxime Reynaud, Hanson Yang. Asa Newell is not really a pure center, but certainly could check this box. Like there are a lot of options in their relative range when it comes to quote unquote backup center. And that means that it's more likely to happen because they have kind of 2 chances at that. At guard, there's really only one guy I could see in the backup point guard role at 13, and it's Yakashonis from Illinois, who I think is probably going to be gone, but could fall there. Later on, maybe you get into like Walter Clayton or Nolan Traore. Like there are guys that you could draft at backup point guard. But I think if you look at both this class, how I view it, how the league views it, how the Hawks might operate, the somewhat loose ties to drafting a big in this class, I would say the more likely scenario is to draft a center and then also kind of go and plug that hole at backup point guard more practically. But look, I'll say this one more time. Even if they draft a center, they still might have to sign another one. Because if it's Berenger, who's pretty raw at this point in time, or you're taking a project like a Hanson Yang or something like that, like there's no guarantee that guy's playable for you. And same thing at guard. Like if you draft Noah Traore, who's a 19-year-old, and you think he's gonna be like playing big minutes as a rookie, like I think might be mistaken on that. So lots of moving parts, but that's the answer. I'll say it's more likely and probably practical to go that route, but uncertainty there. Before we sign off, I will be doing a podcast on Tuesday evening, no matter what, and I'll give my like final draft thoughts, like guys I like, scenarios, any intel that comes up between now and then. I will talk about hypotheticals. There's questions that I might answer tomorrow if I have the time to do that about like impact on the league. Like for instance, the 10th pick changed hands yesterday in the Kevin Durant trade. How does that impact the Hawks? We'll get into that a little bit. Like that's another shooter that could be in line for a front court piece in Phoenix. Could be looking for Derek Queen or Malawach, any of that stuff. Like there's some uncertainty for sure, and there's always going to be. If you're picking 13, there is inherent uncertainty because stuff will either follow to you or not. Where the Hawks trade up, I know Onsi was very comfortable in his answers staying at 13 and 22, but to be very clear, that does not mean he's definitely going to stay there. Like that, being comfortable is one thing, but you can still trade up, trade down, trade out, any of the following. Lots of options on the board. We'll get into all of that stuff tomorrow night in advance. Plus, of course, a full breakdown of Wednesday night's activities and anything Thursday later on in the week into Summer League, etc. So if you're a new listener, thanks for being here. And if you're a recurring listener, I really appreciate you checking us out again today. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Plus, we are on YouTube. So please like this video as you're watching it and be sure to tell your friends about the podcast. Ratings and reviews appreciated. Also follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And you can also follow my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, we are almost there. Less than 2 days away until the NBA draft, and we'll see everybody next time.